two guys just finish doing their thing, but suddenly a very angry soldier arrives. It turns out he was the boyfriend of one of them. GoJung, our protagonist, is outraged because he didn't know his boyfriend already had a boyfriend. Worst of all, he was late for his photo shoot. It turns out he was a student and did a bit of everything to make money. This time, the photographer was upset because he didn't like having his time wasted. But despite everything, he was very professional and was delighted with GoJung's work. That's why he shyly congratulates him and introduces himself. His name is Kim. At night, the boy goes to a nightclub with his three best friends. According to them, the world was too harsh, and the best way to enjoy life was to get drunk and meet men to spend a passionate night with. That night, while they were dancing on the stage, Mr. Kim arrived. The photographer we saw a moment ago. It turned out that he was also gay, but since he was a bit older, he didn't usually go to those kinds of places. But when he saw GoJung dancing, he was captivated. For his part, he knew he had found the man he would spend the night with. Although Mr. Kim was more reserved, GoJung was like a burning flame. But before things got serious, he saw his university classmate. Her name was Mie. Even though they weren't friends, GoJung didn't want people at school to know he was gay. That's why he convinces the girl to cover for him the next day. Mie approaches him to tell him not to worry because his secret will be safe with her. Some guys see them talking and start teasing him. Apparently, Mie had a really bad reputation. Everyone said she was a prostitute because she went to a lot of parties. They saw her with several guys and also because of the way she dressed. Then they asked GoJung if he already did it with her. He gets annoyed and tells them they're idiots. Because of that, his classmates
lo evitan y se convirtió en un marginado.
Although he didn't care. On the other hand, Mr. Kim got his number and invited him out. GoJung apologizes to him for kissing him like that, but Mr. Kim tells him it was fine. Then he takes him to his house. On the way, Mr. Kim was very old-fashioned and liked classical music. He also always followed the rules. That's why he always drove at 50 kilometers per hour. This seemed very boring to our protagonist, but since he was handsome, he was willing to let it slide. Then he takes him to his special place. There he tells him that he has a very pure soul. Then they kiss. GoJung was delighted because Mr. Kim was very sincere and direct. That made him feel butterflies in his stomach. The next day, there was no one in class. Only he and Mie were there. Apparently, no one told them that classes had been canceled. Because of that, the two of them decide to spend time together. They start talking about the only thing they have in common, their taste in men. Both say they're not very picky. They just have to be big, but not necessarily in height. Then she invites him to go party. But he tells her that he's trying to behave because now he's in a relationship and doesn't want to be unfaithful. Mr. Kim was a hopeless romantic, but GoJung wasn't so much. Even so, their relationship seemed to be going well. Mr. Kim was serious about him. That's why he gave him a promise ring. It was made of white gold. Very expensive, by the way. When he felt that their relationship was getting too serious, GoJung was no longer sure about his feelings, because he started to notice things he didn't like. For example, they were both very different. He was very serious and formal, while GoJung was more cheerful and free-spirited. That's why one day he agreed to go out with Mie. Even though he went to a party, he didn't do anything wrong. Later, Mie invited him to her house. He agreed because she promised to pay for his taxi. Later, they started talking about their worst exes to see who had the worst one. They got along very well and became very good friends. Since there were a lot of robberies in the area, Mie invited him to live with her. GoJung, for his part, accepted because he didn't want to keep living with his mother. Later, we found out that she lived alone, precisely because he couldn't stand his mother. And they had a very bad relationship. Sometime later, they would go into the military, and he would be left alone for 2 years. But before leaving, she introduced them to her boyfriend. He wasn't from the same generation, so he didn't understand their vibe, and the guys didn't understand his either. They thought he was a very bland and boring guy. But they told her that if she liked him, it was fine. Although GoJung deep down thought the same thing. But seeing the way he loved him, she felt indebted to him. But when they left the karaoke, Mr. Kim acted as usual. But GoJung had already stayed behind. She asked to end their relationship. He begs her not to do that to him. He is willing to change and become more like him. But GoJung tells him no, that he should look for someone who fits better with him. Mr. Kim, desperate, tells him he can't live without him, to which GoJung replies that he can. Then Mie calls him. She tells him she was at the police station because a drunk man groped her, supposedly because he thought she worked at night. When she got home, she was very upset because even though she seemed like a tough girl, those things did affect her. Then her supposed boyfriend calls her, a DJ who only wanted to sleep with her because supposedly she inspired him to make better music. GoJung suggests that she choose her partners more carefully and start raising her standards. After that, they became closer friends because they only had each other. Sometime later, Mie had changed. She didn't go out partying as much and got a job. One day, Mie discovered that her friend was writing about his adventures in a diary. She told him he was really good at it, and if nothing else worked out, he should become a writer. And his first work could be called A Gay Guy Living with a Crazy Woman. A few days later, it turned out that GoJung was dating a guy. But this time, he was the one who got dumped because his boyfriend thought he was ridiculous. He begs him not to leave and says he's willing to change for him, but he tells him the same thing he once told Mr. Kim when he gets home. Mie had bad news for him. She was pregnant, and the worst part was she didn't know who the father was because she had been dating two guys at the same time. She didn't know who to tell. So GoJung offered to take her to the clinic for an abortion, but they made a mistake and went to the wrong clinic. The doctor was pro-life. She tells her to take responsibility for her actions. She gets angry and runs out. Luckily, a nurse recommends a secret clinic to her that performed those kinds of surgeries. After the operation, she felt really bad. Luckily, GoJung was there to support her. Weeks later, Mie had done the same thing again. One day, while GoJung was going to the store, he runs into Mr. Kim, who had been waiting for him for hours to give him some food. Nothing. And it's strange for him to do that. Apparently, Mr. Kim all this time hadn't been able to get over him. But GoJung didn't want to do it. Mr. Kim started to cry and Mie had heard everything. That's why he took Mr. Kim's side. Then he tells his friends, who had already left the army. They tell him that he shouldn't be with anyone out of obligation, but Mr. Kim kept insisting. Days later, everyone at school had found out about Mie's abortion. They thought GoJung was the father. This made them grow even closer. Sometime later, Mie took her studies more seriously. Thanks to that, she got an internship position, and she had to attend a 3-week training program. Because of that, GoJung had to live alone. And since he didn't have his friend to tell things to, he decided to write them down. A couple of weeks later, Mie came back. But she wasn't alone. Her new boyfriend took her home. Apparently, she had found a boyfriend. When she showed him a photo, GoJung said he seemed like a decent guy, unlike the guys she usually dates, because he's just an ordinary guy. Sometime later, she officially introduced her boyfriend to him. Even though as a good friend, he wanted to tell him all the things Mie did at university, but he preferred not to, so he wouldn't get her in trouble. Their relationship lasted a long time, until one day the boyfriend found out about all the rumors at the university, especially the one that said she had an abortion, and that the father was GoJung. Mie tries to explain everything to him, but he doesn't believe her. In the end, she has no choice but to tell him that her friend was gay. But even so, he still thinks it's a lie. When she gets home, she's very depressed and tells her friend what happened. She confesses that she had to tell her boyfriend that he was gay,
GoJung se molesta porque no quería.
so that everyone finds out. Because of that, a lot of hurtful things are said. In the end, he decides to leave. Since he was feeling really bad, he went to get drunk and to distract himself with other men. But it didn't go very well for him, to be honest. That's why he calls Mr. Kim, who thought it was his chance. When he takes him home, GoJung discovers that he wasn't the same anymore. Now he was cold, and he had also started breaking the rules. Although deep down, he was still the same romantic as always, because he took him to his favorite place. There, seeing that Mr. Kim still loved him, he tells him to please move on, and to find a good person who truly loves him just as he is, and in the way he deserves. With a hug, he thanks him and says goodbye to him forever. Sometime later, GoJung finished writing his novel where he recounted his romantic adventures. And with a bit of luck, he had agreed to publish it. The first person he told was his best friend, since she was also part of that story. Mie congratulates him and tells him she has missed him. She also tells him that she is going to get married. In the end, she managed to fix things with her boyfriend and wanted her friend to help her choose her dress. But unfortunately, her happiness is interrupted. Mr. Kim had died. When he asks his father how it happened, he tells him it was a traffic accident because he was speeding. Because of this, he feels very guilty because Mr. Kim wanted to change for him, to break the rules and adapt to his world. But in the end, it was too fast for him. That's when he realized that Mr. Kim, he was someone he could share his life with and maybe stop feeling so lonely. But it was already too late to regret it. A few days later, he went to see his friend, and they finally reconciled. She also told him that he could rent her apartment, since she was moving in with her husband now. She also asked him to sing at her wedding, even though he doesn't want to. In the end, she manages to convince him. That night, he asks her if she's sure about getting married. She says yes, because her boyfriend is the love of her life. Hyun feels sad because he always thought those things didn't exist. But now that his friend is getting married, he thinks that maybe he was wrong. When the wedding day arrives, Hyun feels uncomfortable. But Mie seems very happy. And when it's time for the song, Hyun does his best. In the end, Mie gets emotional and they both sing their song. That's how a chapter of his life closes. His best friend got married and moved on. And as for him, he was left alone in that house where they shared so many moments together. Sometime later, Hyun went back to dating. While he was trying to win over a guy, his mother called him and told him she had cancer. Even though the doctors did everything they could to save her cancer refused to leave her body. That's why Hyun joined a support group. There, he met a mysterious guy. He was very bold, exactly the type he likes. After the meeting, Jun-soo invites our protagonist out for some drinks. While they talk, they realize they have a lot in common. Hyun is fascinated, so a few days later they go out again. Jun-soo treats him very well, and that's why he thinks Jun-soo is also interested. Although our protagonist, he wasn't sure if he was gay. But for us, it was too obvious because he took great care of him and even walked him home. Sometime later, his mother had already given up. That's why she decided to spend her last days with her son. Although she tried to be optimistic, her son tells her not to give up and not to accept death. The lady, on her part, told him that she wanted to see him married before she died. That was her last wish. But he was traumatized by marriage because his parents were never happy while they were married. The only time he saw his father happy was when he was with his lover. Then we see that Hyun, he tries to get closer to Jun-soo. But since he was a macho guy, his activities were very rough. Still, love makes you do things you would never do. Since the boy he liked was so macho, he wasn't really sure if he was gay. He thought maybe he was just being nice. At night, to forget everything, he decides to drink until he passes out. The next day, his mother tells him he only has a few hours left to live. But it was just an exaggeration to get him to visit her. She was a matchmaker. And even though she was sick, she was working. It seemed like a cliche of life to him that she would bring so many couples together, and that her only son is still single. Later, Hyun meets Jun-soo and tells him that this time, he gets to choose the place. So he invites him to a gay bar, to clear up any doubts once and for all. But the guy felt very uncomfortable. He didn't like this kind of environment, no matter how much Hyun tried to cheer him up. The guy was really annoyed. So the main character decides to leave. And in the end, a store, when they're drunk, the guy confesses that he likes him, and that he's in the closet. That's why he doesn't like being in public places. Hyun tells him that he understands, and that he likes him too. Then they both kiss. The next day, they both wake up in the same bed. They had spent the night together. Hyun asks him when he knew he was gay, and the guy answers that it was from the very first moment he saw him, when he fell in love with him. Hyun was already in love, and now he's even more in love, because he knew that the guy felt the same way. Because of that, they started dating. It seemed like he had found what he had always wanted. They lived happily ever after. But things with his mother got worse. Her illness had started to take a toll on her body, and she only had a few months left to live. Even so, he would sneak out from time to see his boyfriend. but he still felt uncomfortable about being seen together in public places. Even so, he seemed willing to change. But suddenly his superiors from work arrived. They asked him, "Why did you go out alone with a man?" The man teases him and says he seems homosexual. Then his wife forces him to apologize and tells him not to insult him. But then GoJung arrives and takes him by the hand. This makes Yoon-soo very upset because he didn't want his superiors to find out that he was gay. Because of that, they both end up arguing. But our protagonist was the one who felt worse because there were too many emotions in his life. His only escape was his boyfriend, and he had just fought with him. Luckily, at night, the boy talks to him and then goes to see him. But his mother discovers his diary and sees the photo of him with his boyfriend. It turns out that when he was young, she had seen him kissing another boy. That's why she sent him to a religious conversion center, where they promised to cure him. And because of that, she became deeply religious. That's why at first GoJung didn't want anyone to find out he was gay either, because he was afraid of disappointing his mother. Meanwhile, his boyfriend apologizes to him, but he reiterates that he doesn't like everyone knowing that he's gay because he had a very difficult past, and he didn't want to go through it again. Because of that, he fights with his boyfriend again, but his mother had gotten worse, so she couldn't be alone anymore. The lady felt really bad for how she treated her son, for not accepting him as he is, and for trying to change him. But she didn't have the courage to tell him, so she just gives him money. At night, he goes out drinking with his friends to forget his problems for a while. But when he's drunk, he calls his boyfriend. His boyfriend tells him he can't go out, and that if he wants to see him, he should go to his house. He says he won't do it because he supposedly has dignity. But in the end, he ended up going to beg him and to get his daily dose of crumbs. The next day, it seemed like they had reconciled, but GoJung managed to see what he was working on. It was a thesis titled The Evils of Homosexuality, where he used his experiences and those of his partners. In other words, GoJung was nothing more than a test subject. Disappointed, he goes back to the hospital. But like a true crumb chaser, he decides to give him one last chance. He tells him to go to the park near the hospital because he wants to introduce him to his mother. Joon-soo promises that he will go, but when the day comes, hours go by and he doesn't show up. When he calls him, he doesn't answer. In the end, he never showed up. At night, the boy writes to him and apologizes for not going. He makes up a bunch of excuses, and he asks him to meet for a meal at a very special place. Even though GoJung knows the boy is just using him, he decides to go with him. In the scene, he acts as if nothing is happening. But the boy tells him that he is going to the United States and that he will never return to Korea. He asks him to move on and meet a good girl, hinting that he should straighten out his life. He tells him that it was all part of his investigation, and that what they experienced wasn't real, that there was no love at all. This breaks his heart, and furiously he starts hitting him. But the boy doesn't defend himself. On the contrary, he seems to want him to hit him and take out his anger on him. When he got back home, he was devastated, so he makes a fatal decision. He starts taking a lot of pills and overdoses. He wanted to end his suffering once and for all. But luckily, the pills weren't enough, and the doctors were able to save his life. His mother and his friends were very happy. He had left them. Many days later, he received a letter. His cockroach ex had read his book and sent him some corrections. He also apologizes for having hurt him, and he says that he really was in love, that the day he was going to introduce him to his mother, he did go to the park, but he didn't dare to approach. As for his mother, she was very proud of her son because he had received awards and was featured in the newspaper for his book. Besides, she already knew that her son was gay. That's why on their last walk, she tells him that she's sorry for having hurt him. But back then, she felt it was for the best. Her son tells her that he understands, and that it doesn't matter anymore. A few days later, his mother sadly passes away. The cancer had won. After burying her, she had left him an apartment. But because of its location, he didn't want to live there. At night, he goes out drinking with his friends. They think he's just forcing himself to be happy. But since they are his friends, they have no choice but to support him. At that party, he meets a very handsome bartender. After drinking a lot, he kisses him. The guy is fascinated by him. That's why the next day he goes to his workplace, and he waits for him until he gets off work. Since he was in mourning, he makes things clear. He's not looking for a relationship at that moment. That's why he apologizes for kissing him. But the guy whose name is Kyun was very sweet and charming. So when they say goodbye, GoJung decides to go after him. But Kyun had thought exactly the same thing. Apparently, this was love at first sight. Then they go out for drinks to get to know each other better. Apparently, they were very compatible. It's like they fit perfectly with each other. When they get home, GoJung invites him to stay over because the guy lived far away, and he had missed the last train. But Kyun tells him that he has a rule, not to sleep with anyone unless he has seen them 3 times. GoJung laughs and tells him that nothing will happen unless he wants it to. That's how they end up sleeping together. But they only sleep. The next day, Kyun was running late, so he left in a hurry. GoJung really liked him and was left very intrigued. But that day, Mie calls him, and she tells him that they have to go to a club with her sister-in-law. But since it was a girls' night, he gets bored and decides to go look for Kyun. He knew Kyun would be working at the bar, so he waited at his place until his shift was over. When Kyun finished, he invited him to his house. But Kyun tells him that they've already met 3 times and now they can finally do their thing. When GoJung wakes up, the guy had cooked as a way of paying him back. He was the first to ever do that for him, so he finds it really sweet. Then Kyun starts telling him about his life. That he's from Jeju Island, and he went to Seoul because his brother is studying medicine. His mother sent him there to clean his brother's house and help him with his things, basically as if he were his employee. Because of that, their relationship was really bad. But since he was studying nursing, he had no choice but to put up with it until he finished. As time went by, his love grew stronger. They seemed meant for each other, even though they had no real relationship. They simply saw and loved each other, nothing more. That's why one day Kyun arrived early and took him to a lookout point to ask if he wanted to be his boyfriend. Hyun was in love, and this time he wanted to go further. That's why he tells him that before accepting, he has to share his biggest secret. It turns out that, a few years ago, he had an ex-boyfriend who was unfaithful to him. Because of that, he infected him with HIV. No one knew about it. Neither his friends nor me. She was the one he told everything to. Kyun was the first person he told because he didn't want to start a relationship with secrets. He tells him to think about it and to give him his answer later. Kyun doesn't hesitate for a moment. He was in love too. That's why he says he doesn't mind. And that they can always take care of each other. That's how they start. A new chapter in their lives. A beautiful and serious relationship in which they can both be themselves, but where they are willing to adapt to each other, where they don't have to pretend or feel embarrassed. Months later, Goyun had to take a physical exam for his next job. But because of his illness, he wasn't sure he could pass it. That's why Kyun tells him that he'll give him the ultimate proof of love. He'll cheat for him. He'll pretend to be Goyun so that he passes the exam and gets the job he wants so much. Since they were the same height and had the same blood type, no one notices the difference. And that's how Goyun gets the job. Kyun had also started his nursing internship. Both of them were living a dream life. But because they worked very far away, they could barely see each other. Because of that, Goyun gets upset. But since he was in love, it passes quickly. Sometime later, Kyun arrives very early at his boyfriend's house to tell him that he can't stand his brother anymore because he treated him really badly. And since he was studying medicine, his mother always took his side. That's why Goyun tells him to move in with him. They both go to the boy's house, but it turns out he lived really far away. That's when he realizes all the effort Kyun made to see him. In the end, the happy couple start living together. The first few months, things were going really well. Both were very happy and enjoyed their time together. But things can't be good forever. Goyun was having problems at work, and since nobody wanted to publish books, he had no choice but to endure it. Because of all that pressure, sometimes he would come home, and he would take it out on poor Kyun. Over time, their relationship became very routine and boring. All that passion from the beginning was fading away. Kyun tried to revive it, but his boyfriend wouldn't stop writing. He wanted to become a writer so he could quit his job. That's why he didn't have much time to dedicate to their relationship. This made Kyun upset. Goyun, for his part, was also frustrated, and he knew that their relationship wasn't going well. He tells his friends that they haven't been intimate for 3 months. They are shocked, and they suggest that he go on vacation to Bangkok to rekindle the flame of passion. He listens to them, and weeks later, they're on their honeymoon. Their plan worked perfectly. They had both fallen in love again. The day before returning, GoJung was afraid because he didn't want their relationship to go back to the way it was. Kyun comforts him and says that if they fight again, they'll just have to make up. And if they fight again, they'll have to make up once again. But saying it is much easier than doing it, because weeks after they returned, they had a big argument, and Kyun left the house. But since he had nowhere to go, he had to come back. But many months later, they had overcome that, and now they were a much more stable couple. Kyun became the head nurse, but he was offered a better position in China, where he'll be paid double for 2 years. He asks his boyfriend to go with him. It's a great opportunity for him, but he doesn't want to be apart. GoJung tells him not to miss it, but Kyun replies that there's no way he'll go without him. So he promises to find a way for both of them to go to China. People with HIV and other serious illnesses weren't allowed. Because of that, GoJung can't go. Kyun tells him that he won't accept the position they offered him, but GoJung tells him he has to, that there's no way he'll let him miss that opportunity. That's why they both start packing, and they spend their days as if nothing's wrong. They joke, play, and love each other, as if their story would never end. Soon, the day they have to say goodbye arrives. Kyun asks him if he'll wait for him, but GoJung doesn't say anything. He just asks him to find someone who loves him just as he deserves. Kyun was upset, but GoJung knew that was the only way for him to leave without regrets. Many months later, he had gotten what he wanted. He became a full-time writer, and finally, he was able to quit his job. During all this time, he hadn't dated anyone. He stopped going to parties, and he was completely alone. Because of that, his friends were worried about him, because he had changed a lot. They thought he was depressed and that he might do something crazy. But he just wanted to relax because he had quit his job. Because of that, they took him out of his house to celebrate. But then he got a call telling him that his book had won a very important award. In fact, he was the first Korean author to win it. The award also came with a lot of money. That's why his father, who abandoned him many years ago, magically showed up. He told him that now that he has money, he could give him his late mother's house since he was having financial problems. GoJung is no fool, and he knows that his father just wants to take advantage of him. So he tells him that he won't give him anything and that he has no right to demand it. He understands that his son holds a grudge against him. So to try to make things right, he asks for his address to send him a very fancy mattress as a gift. But he didn't want anything from his father. He was present in his life. It's as if he were a stranger. But since he had no other family, he felt a little bad for him. That's why he looks for men on a dating app, to try to fill the emptiness he feels inside. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop thinking about GoJung. After so much time and after ending the relationship, he couldn't get over it. But before he can keep feeling sorry for himself, his friends call him. It turns out that one of them had a fight with his boyfriend. A wild night to get revenge. But it turns out that his boyfriend had planned it all as a surprise proposal. The guy says yes, and his boyfriend promises to make him happy for the rest of his life. GoJung felt happy for his friend, but at the same time, he was sad because he always thought that people like them would never have what they call a happily ever after. The closest he ever got to that was with Kyun, but fate wanted them to break up. Looking back, he thinks maybe he inherited that from his father. Because just like GoJung, he had many partners. And in the end, he didn't stay with any of them. Because of that, he resigns himself and goes back to looking for men on the dating app, hoping fate will bring him face to face with Kyun. One day, he meets up with a mysterious guy at a very luxurious hotel. When he gets to the room, it was a very handsome man. Since he liked him, he decides to act like he used to, and he acts in a very playful way. In the end, they spend the night together. A few days later, his friend had to prepare her bouquet for her wedding. She, like other brides, was having pre-wedding jitters. It's not because she doesn't want to get married, or because she doesn't love her future husband. She was just afraid of the unknown, because it was something completely new and supposed to last for the rest of her life. After that, from the other night, she calls him. She tells him to come see her. But GoJung was tired of doing it just for pleasure. He wanted to feel something more. So he starts to play with him. But to his surprise, the guy goes along with it. That's how both of them start to feel a stronger attraction. That's why the guy tells him that he has to go back to his country, but he invites him to visit. And interestingly, it's the same city he went to with Kyun. That's why he accepts without hesitation. He starts to remember the good times he had with his beloved Kyun. He stayed at the same hotel and in the same room. After longing for the past, he goes for a walk around the city. And once again, he starts to visit the same places he went to with Kyun. But this time, being completely alone, he was tired of feeling that way. Even though the guy who invited him was in that city, he was a very busy man and couldn't go for a walk with him. Besides, he thought that no matter how much he searched, he would never find another person like him. In the afternoon, he meets up with the guy from the hotel. He was the director of a very successful company, which is why he liked to keep a low profile. But Kyun was the opposite. He just wanted to have a good time. That's why when night comes, they get drunk, trying all the drinks at the bar. At the end of the night, they go to their hotel, to that room. The two of them were completely alone because each one was lost in their own thoughts. They had a lot on their minds. Then, the guy goes to the bathroom and falls. When Kyun goes to see what's going on, it turns out that the reason for his troubles was his family. He had a wife and a daughter. But they found out about his sexual orientation. That's why he left. But his family wanted him to put that aside and go back to his wife and daughter, as is considered normal, because of how serious this situation was. Kyun had no choice but to leave. He wrote him a note saying that he had misunderstood things. What they felt wasn't love. They just wanted to stop feeling lonely. Love should be about sharing yourself with the other person, just as you are. That's why he decided to live as himself from now on. And he asked him to do the same. When he returns to his country, he decides to start from scratch. He wants to move forward with his life. That's why he moves to a new apartment. He gets rid of the things that remind him of his beloved Kyun, because he couldn't start over if he kept looking back. In his new building, he invites his friends for a housewarming party. Since they were the only people he could truly be himself with, but on that rooftop, while he's celebrating with them, he reveals to us that he started writing his books about his failed relationships because he hoped to find the reason why they failed. But he didn't find a single answer. What I believe is that they failed because he couldn't be himself, because he didn't love himself enough. Since the love you can give can't be greater than self-love. All of GoJung's relationships failed because of that. Because he was trying to find the love he lacked in others, when he should have been looking for it within himself. The only one with whom he could be himself, and let the other person be herself, was with Kyun. But fate wanted to separate them. And that's how this story ends. With GoJung celebrating his new chapter with his friends, with a wish to find that happily ever after, but without being in such a rush. Thank you very much for watching the video until the end. I hope you liked the summary. I made this video especially for this month because it's Pride Month. I really hope you liked it. Remember not to settle for crumbs in love, and I'll see you in the next story.